Hello and welcome back to Read Becca. This is my weekly update on what I read, what I'm currently reading, what I'm looking forward to reading. So I failed to mention all of the things I really wanted to mention last week, so I'll talk about that later, but I'm filming this a little bit early because of some of that stuff, so we'll get back to that. But let's get into the books. So first, I want to mention this one because this was a reread, and I don't have a whole lot to say other than I continue to love this book. I read this for the read-along hosted by Read, Write, Create with Katja, and among others, which I linked last week. And this is a fantasy from the Discworld, Terry Pratchett's very long-running series, which you can see. I've got a large shelf of Discworld right there. This is a favorite of mine. This is the first in the Moist von Lippig series, and Moist is kind of a con man who gets very pushed into running the post office. The post office is very run down and derelict, and he has to kind of bring it back from failure. And so that is a really interesting story. If you like fantasy with bureaucracy and paperwork, this is for sure for you. So definitely check this one out. I loved it. Then my romance read for the week, G.A. Aiken, the Blacksmith Queen. I don't think this was romance. So, yeah, to be romance, you tend to have a majority romance plot. And this has moments of flirtation, maybe. It has a sex scene near the end, but I wouldn't call it romance, really. This is pretty much just epic fantasy for the most part, and it's a pretty light one, considering the size. It's very funny, but with moments of very brutal stuff. So what is this about? This is all about a kingdom where the king has died, and his heirs have all kind of started massacring each other for the throne. But there's also a prophecy that a peasant queen is going to rise, and that prophecy, the rumor is that it's actually the blacksmith Keely's sister, Beatrix. And so she's all for that. But some things go slightly awry, and it turns out that the prophecy rumor was wrong, and it's actually Keely who is the prophesied queen. So this group of soldiers, the Amici, show up ready to throw in with a queen because they have political reasons that they don't want to support the king's heirs. And so that's a really interesting premise and setup. Beyond that, the tone of this is really fun. This was so great, and it has a little bit of everything that you would expect from a real epic fantasy. It's got different types of magic. It's got elves, dwarves, kind of dire wolves, I would say. They're wolves with like fire in their eyes. It's got centaur shifters, I will say. It's got dragons. It's got all types of dragons are alluded to toward the end, and that was really exciting. I'm hoping there's more dragons, and I know this author has another series called the Dragonkin series that this made me want to pick up. Yeah, and Keely as a character is just fantastic. She is a blacksmith, and she is consistently alluded to as being very large and having really broad, strong shoulders, things like that. But she's also super duper empathetic. Like, she really cares about her family. She really cares about her community. She's very protective of them. And she's also really empathetic to animals. And I loved that. So she's kind of a horse girl, which is interesting considering, as I mentioned, centaurs. She feels a lot of empathy for horses, but she also seems to have some sort of like a healing magic for animals. So that was really interesting. And I thought it was super unique to have a blacksmith protagonist who's a woman, who is also she's inherited that job from her mother, who is also a blacksmith. Her dad is a farmer and just kind of common, and he also is very emotional. So I loved how much this played with tropes, and it was just such a fun, good time, really. Even though there are quite a lot of brutal moments. And there's some animal death in here, I would say. If you are sensitive to that, you may not like it, but overall the tone was great. The pacing was very fast. So this was an easy, fun read. And it looks like this may continue on as a series. I would definitely pick up another book from this author. And I know this author, as I said, has other series under this name, but also writes under another name. And I had mentioned that early on, I think in my TBR, and a cousin came back and mentioned that that name is Shelley Lawrenston, which she writes like paranormal romance with shifters in it as well. So this one was really interesting, very different from anything I had read, very funny in tone and quick-paced epic fantasy. Definitely enjoyed it. Then I got to a Spindle, Splintered by Alix E. Harrow. And I mentioned last week that I had just picked this up at random because I couldn't leave it on the library shelf. And it was, in fact, as expected, a very, very speedy read. I read it in an afternoon in a single sitting, really. It's heavily illustrated, as I kind of showed off. And as it turns out, these are the original illustrations from Sleeping Beauty. So this is Arthur Rackham's original illustrations for Sleeping Beauty, but then they're rearranged. So this one is nothing like I expected. This turned out to be completely different from Harrow's other work. It really lacks the qualities that I loved in Harrow's previous work, but this is just such a show of her abilities because it is so different. So particularly to do with the prose. This has really utilitarian prose and even, poorly formatted text messages in here as well. So I was expecting a much more magical, high fantasy type book, like a more traditional fantasy, and this is the complete opposite of that. This is not that at all. So I just want to read the opening because that gives you a better sense of the tone, and I love the art on this one. Sleeping Beauty is pretty much the worst fairy tale any way you slice it. It's aimless and amoral and chauvinistic as shit. It's the fairy tale that feminist scholars cite when they want to talk about women's passivity in historical narratives. She literally sleeps through her own climax, as my favorite gender studies professor used to say. Double entendre fully intended. Jezebel ranked it as the least woke Disney movie of all time, which, in a world where The Little Mermaid exists, is really saying something. Ariel might have given up her voice for a dude, but Aurora barely uses hers. She has a grand total of 18 lines in her own movie, fewer than the prince, the villain, or any of the individual fairy godmothers. So that clearly is a very modern tone, very casual, and that is from our primary character. So Zinnia is the main character, and she has a degree in folklore, and her specialty in folklore is all to do with illness and disability in folklore. And I wish that had played out a little bit more, but this is such a slim volume that it was played out well, I think. So she has this connection because she is a dying girl. She has an illness that she is meant to perhaps have died by now. She may be dying soon is the presumption, but she's having her 21st birthday. And her friends throwing her party, of course, bring her, because of her love of this story, a spindle. And that sets her off on an adventure that she doesn't expect at all. So it's got this very modern setting. She continues texting her best friend through this adventure. There's some queerness. It's wonderful. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was insightful. There were moments where it felt like it was going to go the wrong way on the kind of folkloric illness and magical healing kind of thing, but I think it turned that around and did handle it really well. So overall, yeah, this was fabulous and showed a great deal of versatility from Alix Harrow. I don't think it was a new favorite, but I think if you really like maybe the Wayward Children stories, particularly Jack and Jill's from Sean and Maguire, I think you would really enjoy this as well. This has a fairly similar tone to that. So yeah, really enjoyed it, very surprised by it. Then I will hold up my big chunky one, The Best of World SF. So I've been reading this for months. Just a couple stories a week with Shannon from That's So Poe. This was my first buddy read, so we had a great time with this. And I think this is very much delivered on the premise of the title, that this was really a best of. Most of the stories in here have won major awards or multiple awards, and it's just such a diverse collection from all over the world. In fact, many translated works in here, and it does have a kind of weird leaning. So it's clear Lavie Tidhar, who is the editor for this, definitely likes kind of non-traditional SF, and that plays to me for sure. That's my sort of thing. So this one contains very few actual space stories. Most of them are kind of bizarre, and some of them I liked a ton, even though I couldn't actually figure out what the plot was saying. So do with that what you will, but I really enjoyed this. I would say the big winners for me out of this, so a couple I really liked were Fandom for Robots by Veena Jamin Prasad and Boot Black by Tade Thompson. Those were very good, and I think both of them kind of played with structure in interesting ways for a short story. And then my absolute favorites from this were Jingzhu by Yisheng Ying, which was that one was very like colonialism focused, but from like alien standpoint. And His Master's Voice by Hannu Raniemi is one I had actually read before in Hannu Raniemi's collected fiction, which is a 5-star collection for me. I absolutely love Raniemi's voice. And this one is very strange, but it's all from the perspective of a cat and a dog, and it was just a delight to reread. Then there was Katerina Sadia's story, The Bank of Burkina Faso, and I think this was probably the favorite of the collection. It was so good. It's very whimsical and kind of sad. It follows 2 characters in snowy Russia, and it imagines the idea of what if those people behind the bizarre spam emails who are trying to convince you to do something financial weird are actually doing that for reasons because they're trapped by some magical loopholes, basically. So convoluted magic loopholes they're trying to get around by sending these emails to get help from people, and they really are desperate. So it imagines that, and these 2 people connect over this premise, and it's so amazing how they do that. So it was just a beautiful magical story, and I didn't really see how it was sci-fi, but I'm very glad it was in here. And then the final stories and shows, If at First You Don't Succeed, Try Again, was one of my favorites in here as well. I have not read a whole lot of Zencho before, and it definitely made me want to read some more because it was so fun. It follows this dragon who is trying to, or another type of creature who is trying to ascend to become a dragon, really. And they're trying for thousands of years. And so we're working through, in this novelette length story, them trying and failing, and then the striving focus gets derailed a little bit by life, and we have to see that balance between striving and living, and I found that so beautiful. So I just loved that one so much. I do have one left in here that I'm planning to get to this weekend, and that's Prime Meridian, and that is a novella length. So if I have things to say about that, I'm going to wrap that up separately. I think there were 2 novella length stories in here. The other one was by RSA Garcia, and that is The Sun from Both Sides. And that one I really enjoyed. So again, I'm gonna say I really enjoyed basically almost all of the stories in here. It kind of felt like 2 separate stories, and I enjoyed those both on their own, but they never quite came together. So for a longer story, I almost wish it had been cut down and shortened into 2 separate stories, but it had such interesting concepts. So that one was very conceptual, and I loved everything behind it, but again, not quite as much the execution. So I think that's all the stories I want to talk about. I mean, there were so many in here that I just, like, half of the authors here I want to find more work from. So that was a big win for sure. Then finally on my finishes, I think, end of the pile, was Sissy, a coming of gender story by Jacob Tobia. This was so great. So I don't know how to talk about this one because it's a memoir. It's obviously a coming of gender story is them kind of figuring out their gender queerness and working through the multi-phased coming out of the closet and becoming an actual public advocate. So Jacob has worked at the UN and has been to the White House and things like that. So this is a person who is very visible for their non-gender conforming, and I found that really interesting. What I think is so important in this, in the young ages, is the ways that maleness and masculinity were socialized really comes through in this story. And so I think that was very important. But then on the flip side, this is not a trauma-filled memoir. So I highly recommend it for that, because most of the things I've read are very trauma-filled. This one, I think many of the things that they are able to do in terms of advocacy come from the fact that they were so privileged. They had a great upbringing. They had a positive experience with their church. So the first person that Jacob came out to as gay was their youth pastor, and was treated positively for it. And like that reaction was actually a good one. They were enabled to share their story as being a creation of God, being gay, and that was, you know, not expected from my perspective, not something I've seen before in a similar memoir. So I really enjoyed that. They've had a great academic career where they've had immense success, where they've had access to special programs throughout their life. And I think all of those things have led them to the shelteredness and privilege that they've had has enabled them to step into these certain advocacy roles where if they were coming from a place of trauma, they may not have been able to. And I think that was a very critical experience to have read. That's not something I've seen before. In terms of the tone of this, I would say this was a good middle of the road book for me, because I would put it somewhere in between Jonathan Van Ness's memoir Over the Top, which is very, very informal and very personal voice. And another one I've read was Me, Myself, They by Luna M. Ferguson. And that one is more of a disconnected informational memoir about how they express their non-binary identity and about their legal fight in Canada for recognition legally as non-binary. So I think this is right in between, where it is that personal voice and informational combined. So this strikes a great balance. So I think one more thing I would want to mention on this is that heels come up in this, high heels. And I specifically mentioned heels in quite a bit of depth on my dress codes review, where, you know, I was talking about the complexity of how high heels can be both a symbol of empowerment and objectification at the same time. And that context is very complicated for us in the Western world. And I think this tackles that really, really well. Jacob, their college letter actually is on the topic of wearing heels, and they were just beginning to explore that side of themselves at the time. And them finding themselves through drag as well, and realizing as they were beginning to do drag that they were connecting with it in a different way than the other queens that they were involved with. And so that was very interesting, and particularly, as I said, the heels element really struck a chord for something that you know, I've tried to express, where, you know, there is this very personal draw to it from Jacob, and it really was interesting to read that very internal perspective. So I just really, really strongly recommend this. I really enjoyed reading it. I think it's a wonderful memoir. So moving on from that, that's all I read this week. all. Then I've got in progress still The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin and Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, and those I am chugging along with. I think I probably will finish The City We Became this weekend, so that is really, really exciting. I have a ton of stuff coming up too that I want to get to for December, so chugging away. On to my stuff that I failed to mention. So I have been super busy with the kittens. They hopefully, at the point you're seeing this, they will be actually getting fixed. Exciting. So they're in the home stretch. I will have them less than a week left, I think, at the point you're seeing this. So I'm filming this early because I also am going to be having some dental work done, and I had completely forgotten to mention this. I don't know what the state is going to be. A couple weeks ago I talked about being on antibiotics and having had some bad dental work in the past. So I have a root canal and crown in the very, very back. So I don't think it will be noticeable, but that's going to have to get removed. I'm going to have a bone graft. So I don't know what the next couple weeks is going to hold, but I've got a few things backlogged, so I don't think I'm going to have to film a whole ton other than my next weekend's update likely. And I think from what I'm hearing, it sounds like initially things will be kind of chill, and then it may actually get more sore over the next couple weeks. But this will be the first of like 3 procedures I'm going to have over the next few months. So like I said, it's way in the back, so I don't know how noticeable it will be, but that's going to be removed, so there may be a gap there. I don't know if it's going to be noticeable or weird, because that's going to have to fully heal up before I can move on to the next phase. So that's what's going on with me. I have been so busy, as I said, with kittens. I mean, I literally forgot about Bake Off. Like, I forgot Bake Off was a thing for the past couple weeks. So I am going to be catching up on, I think it's up to the finale now. I have been avoiding any sort of social media posts about it. But yeah, I just have been in a hole of not watching any TV at all. So I haven't watched any TV or movies the past couple weeks. It's been reading and kittens. Wheel of Time TV show is out, so I obviously have not watched that yet. I know everyone is watching it. I'm not super duper interested. I will probably get to it eventually, but like, I'm not a huge fan of Wheel of Time. And actually, I guess starting my recommendations early here, Leanna's Library did a vlog of reading the first book of Wheel of Time, The Eye of the World, and it was hilarious. I thoroughly enjoyed it. As someone who doesn't love that series, I don't hate it either. I feel very meh about it. It was a very funny vlog, so I highly recommend checking out Leanna's Library vlog. So another thing I keep forgetting to mention is the Giller Prize. So the Giller Prize was announced for What Strange Paradise by Omar El-Akkad, and I loved that book. Spoiler for my favorites, it's going to be one of my favorite books this year. I absolutely loved it. I have a single book review of it. I will link that somewhere. Really fabulous book. Highly recommend you check it out. So good. So well deserving of the prize, in my opinion. There's also the BookTube prize. So I'm kind of thinking of signing up for it. I don't know if I have the bandwidth. I mean, obviously I read enough, but it seems like it's going to take a lot of mental bandwidth to do. But yeah, what are people's thoughts on the translated work section? Because I'm really thinking about signing up for that, but I don't know how much work other people are feeling like they've had to put in to doing the prize. It sounds like you can just sign up for a single round, and that's okay. And I think that might be a way I go, but I think I've got till the end of December to figure that out. And then I think my one main recommendation this week is going to be an author event that I'm way behind on recommending, and that is We're Not Broken by Eric Garcia. This is all about the autism conversation, and this was such a good author discussion. It was so incredible. They tackled the tough topics like right out of the gate and just constantly were hitting every single one. The biggest thing I think that was like overarching to this was the focus on the autistic advocating for themselves rather than having a parent or a family member advocate for them. It was very much him getting across the point that even in the case of nonverbal individuals, like, they can find ways to communicate, and that should always be the number one thing you're focused on with them. And I think that is a really important message, and something where, you know, I've brought this up before, where there's kind of a big clash between the autistic community and the families of the autistic community, with certain organizations really wanting to put the advocacy power in the hands of caregivers and guardians and not actually listening to the autistic individuals themselves. And so I think this was a really, really powerful conversation, and definitely highly recommend. So I think that's it. I don't know what my status is right now in terms of how I'm going to be feeling at the point that this is going up as I'm filming this. So the infection has actually come back, so I knew that was a possibility, but I'm a few days away from doing the actual surgery, so I'm not overly worried about it. I will get an antibiotic with that. So I'm feeling kind of tired and achy, chilly kind of thing, so that's been not fun. But otherwise, I had a great holiday. I've had a really wonderful reading week, as you can see. So overall, I'm doing well, and I hope to continue that. Videos will still be coming, but they'll probably be mostly pre-filmed for a little bit until I'm feeling a little better, depending on how things go. Or I may just feel fine after everything and have no interruptions whatsoever. So that is what's going on with me. I hope you're having a great week. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, so lots of progress and still not anywhere near done. We just got done putting together the gate and this plant, and the peacock, I've got it attached. So it's going pretty well. So I don't know what has happened, but I'm assuming cold weather. Coco has suddenly decided he is a lap cat. So this is the situation with Coco, my reading spot. He's stealing my worms, I think. And then that lump down there is a roo.